There we go. Fredericton, always meet some people and never know who I'm going to bump into. And your name is?
My name is John McKay from Miramichi.
Miramichi. And are you the mayor now? No.
Well, I was the mayor.
You
I
were
was
the
the
mayor.
mayor of Miramichi, and I was the mayor before that of Newcastle, before it was part of the city. And I was the MLA there for 20 years.
MP?
MLA, provincial
MP, yeah, I know, but you've never been
No,
an MP.
I ran for the MP nomination, but I wasn't successful in getting the nominations.
Who won that year?
Well, I ran twice. The first year, Charlie Hubbard got it back in
Charles.
1993. And the next time was just last fall when Patrice Finnegan got the nomination.
So, listen, I watched one of your YouTubes a few months ago, and I told you, I'm repeating myself, and I thought it was very well done. You made a speech explaining, what the people could do and talking what a politician is. What is the difference between a liberal and a conservative?
Well, one time there was a considerable difference. The Conservative Party, of course, was the party that traditionally wanted to maintain the status quo, a party that was very conscious about keeping taxes low and not spending too much money on social programs, very traditional type party. The Liberal Party, 100 years ago, was the party that wanted to reform matters, wanted to bring in public education, public health care, to widen the franchise to allow as many people as possible the right to vote, and to try to have a level playing field. I mean, Louis Robichaud was the best example of that when he came in with his program of equal opportunity. Not equal benefits, equal opportunity. So everybody would have a fair starting point to develop their lives. Today, the two parties have become more parties with the argument, who can do a better job of managing the province? Who's better at administering? Who can make the province more efficient? So basically, it's a little bit twiddly-dum and twiddly-dee that today the campaigns are based on who can be more efficient. And sometimes efficiencies can mask sacrificing principles.
Yeah.
And that's why people are so confused, especially in New Brunswick, because they're electing a government, they're throwing it out. The next time they're electing a new government, they're throwing it out, putting the old government back in again.
Frank McKay, 58 seats.
58 seats, and that was a big, that was quite a change there. But we basically, although I was a member of that government for 12 years, we went from having a very liberal administration under Richard Hatfield to having a very conservative administration under Frank McKay.
Really?
And we've had this process ever since then of which party can be more conservative than the other party. Whereas in the past, Louis Robichaud was the great liberal reformer. Richard Hatfield, he was in for 10 years. Richard Hatfield carried on another 17 years, basically the same programs. Didn't really change anything, perhaps, expanded on it. But then when Frank came in, we were pretty well in debtor's prison as far as how much we owed and how much taxes we were paying.
So what do you think of Brian? I'm sorry. What do you think of Brian Gallant?
Well, I think
compared to Frank McKay.
Well, I think that Brian Gallant has a very Frank had a fortunate position because Frank had a very strong mandate.
Oh yes.
People who had a great appetite to address the deficit, to address the high taxes, to address the high unemployment rate, and I think New Brunswick at the time of McKenna was one of the first provinces to say deficits aren't necessary. Balanced budgets are good, and then that became sort of like a pattern all across Canada. Now we have Brian Gallant coming in with inheriting the Alward deficit, which was built up by inheriting
Sean
the
Graham.
Sean Graham deficit. So it has been multiplying, and really nobody has as yet taken any effective measures. So, and they recognize that people don't really embrace tough medicine.
No.
But we all know that sometimes the toughest medicine is going to give us the quickest cure.
Yeah.
And
you're a straight shooter. You have an opinion on the language commissioner?
well,
I'm French. I got my opinion.
The language commissioner she's hard to do a job. And she's made a point that if people are not satisfied with rules that she has to enforce, then
Change
it's up
the
to
law.
the politicians to change it. Sometimes the politician don't want to take responsibility for the rules that they put in place, so they let someone else be the kind of the tough cop on it.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to remember as far as language in New Brunswick goes, two basics. We have two languages here of equal status. And it's important in a small territory like this with limited resources that we learn as much as possible to work together and to cooperate, while at the same time respecting those two language communities.
I always said that.
There's a danger in that if you try to basically differentiate, there's a point where basically you have two solitudes.
Yep.
That's united by a bilingual administration or a bilingual civil service, and you don't want that. I was just reading in the paper here recently, they did an assessment on the lack of history. The lack of history being taught in New Brunswick schools. Well, if we don't know our own history, then we're going to repeat the same mistakes.
Yep.
And how can we understand in a complicated country like this without knowing our history?
Well,
in the English system, they really don't even follow Canadian history,
Yeah.
to the extent that they should, and practically no Acadian history. In the French system, Acadian history is very much emphasized. So you've got people in a small province, two different perspectives on the same history,
Yep.
as opposed to saying, look, let's teach each other
Yes.
where we all came from.
I always said, and the one thing about the Miramichi, you don't fool around with those people from Miramichi. When she suggested the water tower be French and English, I said, my God, they're going to tell them no problem, Gaelic and English. That's what it's going to be.
Of course, our mayor is Jerry Cormier, and that was his position.
Who would have thought? I mean, years ago, the area of Beaverbrook Road and Belfont and all that area, it's all Frenchmen.
Yeah.
It's like the Frenchmen were in the deep woods. The Irishmen arrived, and the Frenchmen were in the deep woods. And the Frenchmen had really, I go there sometimes, it's all big, the French is very, so over 100 years ago. And I always said, I said in the video many times, you know yourself, it's years ago, there would have been no racial slurs, like the niggers, the frogs, the wagon burners. Everybody would have been treated equally. We wouldn't be in this mess that we're in now. And now it's sort of like reverse discrimination.
Well, that's what happened. And my mother-in-law is an Acadian. Her family came to Acadia back in the 1600s, my wife's mother. And eventually were one of the very, very first families in Niguac. Part of the animosity, because we're all from somewhere else in this province. I mean, even you go back to the native population, they came here from Asia originally.
Yeah.
So the first, when the French regime came in, they basically took control of the area, took government of the area away from the natives. Then the British came in, they took the control of the way away from the French government to the English government. The sad thing about it, most of the animosity that we have today is a result of conflicts between two European powers, between France and England. What's that got to do with us today?
True.
So in New Brunswick especially is the most refugee-sponsored province. Most of the Acadians that came into New Brunswick came from Nova Scotia. The ones that avoided the deportation and so on. They moved north to get away from it. Then came the Scots. Like in my area, we're celebrating 250 years of Scottish settlement.
Me mother's from Glasgow, Scotland. I'm half Scottish.
There were mainly people that were evicted from their homelands by the Scottish lords that wanted to get rid of the sheep or get rid of the farmers and run sheep. Then we had the loyalists that were kicked out of the 13 colonies, come up here basically with the clothes on their back. Then we had the Irish that had to leave because they were starving to death as a result of the famine. Then you add to whether that people, there were the Dutch that had to leave, there were the Hungarians that came here in 1956 to get away from the Hungarian communist uprising. We're having the Syrian population today that's coming here, for their lives. The one thing we have in common is that we're a province made up of people that somebody else didn't want.
Oh, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Listen, one more question. If my memory serves me right, weren't you Minister of Education or Transport?
No, I was the Speaker of the House.
You were Speaker of the House. My God, they banned me from the legislature about 10 years ago.
I would never do that.
No, you never do that. No, as a matter of fact, guess what? It was Tanker Malley. Don't answer that.
Well,
Don't answer that. But anyway,
even the Speaker's position has its ups and downs.
I just got a flashback. Yeah, exactly. Listen, I got one final note. What do you think? I hate it. I despise it when they say Francophone school district, Anglophone school district, Francophone school district. What's all that? Couldn't they find like I
Couldn't
told?
they find just the name?
I asked Dennis Cochran that. He says it doesn't sound pretty. Hey, how come they don't call it the Green District or the Blue? What's with this? You wake up in the morning and on the radio.
School District.
Yeah.
Or the Miramichi School District, or the Fredericton School District. You know, it's a little bit like
Forcing, separate
well,
French,
it's sort of
English.
putting a label on everybody. And you know what? As far as the Francophone population goes, we'll call the Acadian population.
Yeah.
They say roughly 1/3 of the people in New Brunswick are of French-speaking background, Acadian background. But it's a much larger percentage when you take into account the people who have Acadian heritage that don't speak the language.
Yeah, I know.
Like in the state of Maine, for example. Maine is mostly French heritage. You know, really, you look at the phone book in Lewiston, Maine, and in Bangor and those places.
La
You're in
Violante,
Moncton,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Same thing here. Probably 2/3 of the population of New Brunswick is Acadian heritage.
Wouldn't you say we got a problem? You don't have to answer this. The problem is moody Québécois. Coming here and say, je suis francophone, je suis francophone. They insist on the French right. We don't have the same mentality as Acadians. Acadians were open-minded. If an Englishman arrived, we'll speak English. But if two Québécois talking, they'll speak French. You know, I mean, they say je suis francophone. They're not saying je suis Québécois, je suis francophone. Like I say, you don't have to answer that. That's,
Well, I think that we're still trying to find our way.
Yeah.
And we can, if we can become mature enough to appreciate that we don't have to achieve progress by having someone else retreat. You know, we can all move up together. A rising tide lifts all boats.
You know a guy that I respect? Bill Fraser.
Yeah.
Good MLA. People's man.
Well, the people elected him 3 times now.
Yeah.
And he's got a tough job because we're going through a lot of trials now in the Miramichi, a lot of controversy. And he's the leader of a government that's bringing in some measures that are causing...
You got an opinion on that?
a good deal of opinion.
P3?
I don't agree with P3
No.
at all. No, I don't agree with P3.
Union
Maybe
busting,
that's my
right?
liberal background because I believe that right now the P3 nursing homes, hospitals, I'm on the hospital board here, are basically non-profit facilities. They're run to serve the public. We don't want to see a situation like they have down in the USA where everything is profit. The hospitals are for profit. They might have a religious name on them, but they're for profit. The insurance companies are making all the money. They're the most expensive health system in the world, and they have a lower infant mortality, or a higher infant mortality than Cuba, and a shorter lifespan than Cuba that doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
They hard to get a bottle of aspirin down there. So I believe that when you start getting essential services like healthcare and so on, that are basically profit-driven, that we're going to lose the focus as to the intent. You know, we're going to go back to the old days, help your neighbor. That's one of the very, very principal tenets in the Bible, is love your neighbor as yourself. And that doesn't mean that why should I pay for him?
Yeah. How come Frank McKenna wanted to privatize jails?
Because Frank McKenna was a conservative. Frank McKenna, and he felt that, well, first of all, originally, I remember...
What was it called again?
Wackenhut.
Yeah, that's it.
Wackenhut.
Thank you.
I remember originally the plan was, in '95, to go all private. Wackenhut was going to come in, they were going to build the youth center, the one that's in Miramichi, and they were going to also employ the staff. So there was such an uproar over that it retreated, and Wackenhut ended up owning the facility, but the staff are public employees. And I don't have any problem even with nursing homes going that way. If it's more efficient, they have somebody private build it and lease it. It's the operation of the facility.
Union is safety.
The operation of the facility should stay public, because once you let the private enterprise run it, you also lose public influence over the decisions that are made.
Listen, you know what? I don't do this too often. I don't shake the hands of politicians because I don't want to catch germs. But you know what? It was a pleasure.
Well, I'm glad
It
to
was a
see you.
pleasure to meet you.
I've followed your blog